beautiful Pillow people. Welcome
Hello,
to
Pillow people.
the final Pillow Talk of the season. Yes, we can applaud
On a
that.
beautiful day.
We can applaud it and mourn it at the same time. I'd like to start with thanking everybody at the Pillow, the year-round and the seasonal employees and interns and the technical staff and facilities who have been in the long fight for the whole season, and they've gotten us through. And so just like a moment to appreciate them.
Yay!
Yeah, they deserve it. My name is Theresa Ruth Howard.
And I'm Robert Garland. And we are... No, I'm sorry.
We are the Traveling Philadelphians. No. It's my pleasure to be a scholar in residence once again here at the Pillow. And this is Robert Garland, who is the new artistic director of Dance Theatre of Harlem.
Thank you.
And I'm just gonna let you know, this is gonna be an interesting conversation because as I was trying to figure out how to structure this, I decided to just give it up to God because Robert and I go back a long way. And so we're just gonna have a conversation and I'll just start by saying
coffee and paper cups.
That Robert and I are both from Philadelphia. Robert went to school at Franklin Learning Center with my sister and danced with her in Philadanco.
Yes.
Correct. So he's known me since I was a wee one. We then danced at Dance Theatre of Harlem together and lived next door. Literally could open our apartment doors and kiss.
Yes.
So for years. And so we go back. And so we're going to have a conversation that I want to kind of introduce you to the Pillow community by let's walk down memory lane and we'll get to Dance Theatre of Harlem. I mean, you'll see how we roll. But one of the things that I love and appreciate about Robert is that he has, my sister says, she remembers him watching the Turning Point.
Yes.
And coming back and being able to recite every line and do all the things. He's got one of those memories. So he's got a steel trap memory like that. And so the free association is real. So get ready. It's true. So Robert, I want to talk to you first about Philadelphia. Because you were one of the first people that would always say, Philadelphia, go ahead, say it.
Then we'll say it together. Had the largest population
of freed black people.
Right, that's right.
In the Union. And so that...
Before Reconstruction.
And that attributes to why we are so haughty.
Precisely.
Exactly. So go ahead.
I think it's the Quakers as well. The Quaker thing there.
And the arts community, the arts really... Philadelphia was a huge arts colony at that time. I think the first art museum was built there. Yes. And we come out of that long legacy of dance, and specifically black ballet and black modern dance. So can you tell us a little bit about your connection to dance and that through line? Because it's really, really interesting.
Well, I started dance late. I started at around the age of 12 or 13. Which is, that's late for dance. I mean, women typically start much earlier, as Theresa did. But men, we always get a little luckier. So I started, but I also made it through, learned all the stuff really quickly. I was at a high school for boys, Central High School in Philadelphia. And that was an all-boys high school, public high school, but it was one of those highly rigored academic schools where you called each other by last name. So I was Garland and such was Smith, and it was a wonderful school. And I had actually a wonderful music teacher there who basically started me along the path of loving classical music. And so that kind of was commensurate with my mother's divorce, actually, from my father. And the first payment that she got from him for child support, she paid for my first dance classes with. Yeah. And so not long after that, I was on scholarship, and I was dancing within about a year, maybe 2 years, with the Philadelphia Dance Company, which was in its early stages, but has become and is a storied modern dance company. But it did not start that way. It started actually as a ballet company. Joe Myers Brown had me and Theresa come from a very long tradition of blacks in ballet, which I think it might be connected, and Theresa can speak to this, to the social, like the cotillion.
Yeah, so there was it's interesting because Philadelphia was one of those cities where racism and segregation sort of ebbed and flowed. So there were periods of time when, like, Dolores Brown, who's one of our black ballerinas, would say you just lived where you could afford as opposed to by race. And then as eras change, the rules change. Mm-hmm. And there was a woman named Essie Marie Dorsey who could pass for white, who passed for white in order to study dance, and then she trained Sidney King and Marion Sujet, who were our teachers.
That's
and
right.
and so there's this legacy of blacks in ballet, and part of that was the social scene. And so the social clubs would hire the two black dance schools, to perform like full ballets. There were hydraulics. Apparently somebody came in a horse at one point and got off and did a variation. Judith Jameson was a part of this legacy. They would dance at these cotillions.
Cotillions, right, right.
And
right.
so there's this, I always like to say that there's parallel societies. So whatever you had in white society, you had in black society. And so that social scene and social clubs were a part of that. And ballet played ballet and opera.
Right.
And the symphony actually played a huge part in that.
Home of Marian Anderson. And we still have those types of spaces now. I think Jack and Jill is a product of that idea, right?
Same timing, same concept.
Same concept.
And so tell me a little bit about Franklin Learning Center, and specifically Faye Snow, because I know that she was very, very, she impacted your life greatly.
Yeah. Well, the collaborator, Marion Sujet, whom she mentioned, who also trained Judith Jamison as well, her co-school director was a man by the name of John Hines, and they ran a school called Judamar. And so when I went to take class, I had to start with adults. And so the adult classes were with a man by the name of John Hines. He had danced with Catherine Dunham. Catherine Dunham had her own ballet company at one point.
Le Ballet Negre in 1931 in Chicago.
Right. And it was after that she began to, I think, focus more anthropologically on the work that she ended up doing, which was studying West African, but also creating her own technique called Dunham technique. And so my first teacher, John Hines, was my first ballet teacher. So I had a black man as my first ballet teacher. So that was very normal to me. And so eventually I went and auditioned for the Philadelphia Dance Company and got in, and the rest is sort of history.
Faye Snow.
Oh, I'm sorry, Faye Snow. Well, the school that I started at was here, but right around the corner was my high school. I transferred from the all-boys high school to a high school with a burgeoning arts department. And Faye Snow was a woman that was there. She was a woman that had studied with the other lady.
Sidney King.
Sidney King, right. She studied with Sidney King. And so she eventually met a woman who... I forget her name. She was a Horton teacher. I forget her name.
Wilson Dagger?
No, but Althea and Faye trained with this woman. So in the migration of Alvin Ailey from California to New York included Carmen de Lavalade, the big stars, Carmen de Lavalade, James Truitt was another one. But then there were some that were not so famous, but knew the Horton technique. And so this woman settled in Philadelphia. And so she trained Faye Snow, who eventually became a connoisseur of the Horton technique, which I know and I teach as well. She was a brilliant a teacher in the sense that, for me, she taught me how to teach through language. She never did a step without an accompanying language that went with it. So that you were always able to teach, and she was also a school teacher as well. She graduated from a phys ed department at a local college, Westchester, and she was teaching at her high school that she graduated from at 21. Well, she graduated when she was 18, but she was teaching there at 21 and studied a lot of...
So the interesting thing about Philadelphia is that a lot of the public schools used to have all these clubs. So this is where Joan Myers Brown started dancing, where Dolores Brown started dancing, were in their high schools. There were a lot of artists, whether they were musicians, painters, whatever, who, because there wasn't enough work, would go into education. And then afterwards they would have a club. So there was literally a ballet club, not a dance club, a ballet club, or an opera club, or a music club. And still today, in order to teach in the public school system, you have to have a phys ed degree, not a dance degree.
Right.
So this is how she probably segued in to that position. Mm-hmm. So I want to jump forward. So you graduate from high school.
Yes.
And you go to Juilliard.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want you to I'm not really interested in Juilliard. I'm really interested in who you lived with when you were studying at Juilliard.
Mm-hmm. Well, Juilliard at that time had no dorms. They do now. And so you were expected to find your own lodging where you're going to live during that time. There was a gentleman who was a product of Philadelphia who at that time was dancing with the Ailey Company. His name was Gary DeLoach. And basically, I asked Gary, or I didn't ask him actually, his teacher, Faye Snow, who was my teacher as well, the woman I mentioned, she discovered him at the high school where she went to teach physical education in one of those dance clubs that Theresa's talking about. And he eventually had a storied career at Ailey, but he went on tour a lot, and so the agreement was that I would live in the apartment because he was always on tour. I was at Juilliard. I would take care of his plants. He had a great green thumb. Like, he could make anything grow into anything. So as I said the other day, like, I immediately at 18 killed all his plants. So he came out the room and was like, what is going on here? You know, but eventually I figured that out. So Gary was a great influence in my life because he also was a muse for Mr. Ailey at the time. And so Alvin created several ballets for him, most notably a Charlie Parker ballet called To Bird With Love. And so I cooked dinner for Alvin Ailey. There's another, the apartment itself that we lived in was a rather large apartment, because in Harlem you can get that at that time. It was originally rented by a man by the name of George Faison. And George Faison was a dancer with the Ailey Company, who also was the first choreographer for The Wiz. And so that apartment was actually his first big thing after doing The Wiz. And so basically between George Faison and Gary DeLoach, I often cooked for Alvin Ailey in that apartment. There was one time I did not fry the chicken all the way through. And George Faison was like, do you realize you have Alvin Ailey in your living room? You've not cooked this right. What are you doing? You know, so you live and you learn. But that was that story.
So now you kind of understand that, like, for me, sitting with Robert, he's like the embodiment of dance history, both like in his experience, but also in the things that he's taken in by sitting in the living room with the likes of Gary DeLoach and Alvin Ailey, and being able to capture all of that. And that is something that I think that really impacts your perspective on dance, on what something like a Dance Theatre of Harlem is, and the reasons why.
Yeah.
So, and also, like, didn't Marilyn Banks live with you as well?
Marilyn Banks lived with us as well. Should I go into that?
Go. Well, tell
A little?
The perfume and the fire. You know what it is.
The perfume and the fire, yes. Marilyn loved to, loved perfume. And so she would buy a bottle of perfume like pretty much every week. And she had tons of perfume in her room. And so apparently she left something on, and one bottle of perfume exploded. And the guy in the elevator said, I kept hearing all these pops, and I didn't know what it was. And it turns out we had a huge fire in the apartment that literally almost burned the apartment down, which was eventually repaired. But Marilyn Banks actually figures greatly because, there was a moment, the Ailey Company, as I was saying to Theresa earlier, had a very kind of typical modern dance kind of setup. They were set up like the Graham Company, the Lamone Company, both repertory-wise and in terms of how Alvin approached it. Dance Theatre of Harlem was very different. We, from the outset, often used contemporary music. I think Arthur Mitchell and Louis Johnson might have thought that at that time, for black people to be attracted, we might want to throw that into the mix. The reason why I raise this is that the trajectory of Dance Theatre of Harlem, and Ailey was already around, shot up really quickly to the point where I think the Ailey organization was a little concerned that this popular music thing wasn't quite working for them. And so their first hit in that regard was something called Sweet Otis. And that kind of put them back on par with what DTH was doing. But Marilyn Banks got her stardom via Sweet Otis and kind of was a legend from that point on.
So from Juilliard,
yes,
you went and you spent some time dancing for Ballet Hispanico.
That's right. My senior year, actually, of Juilliard, and I auditioned for Ballet Hispanico, and Tina Ramirez, who I eventually learned had been at the LaGuardia High School with Arthur Mitchell, hired me, and I immediately went on tour, and it was really wonderful. Went to Europe, and eventually performed here, as Pam articulated in her pre-show talk, with Ballet Hispanico as well. So this was another place that I love Tina Ramirez. She was another one that these were organizations that were not just arts organizations, but also had moral and ethical kind of bases to kind of build themselves upon. Her thing was her Latinx culture. We call it Latinx now, but at the time it was a Hispanic culture. Yeah.
So I never asked you this question before.
Uh-huh.
Did you consider yourself a ballet dancer at that time, or a modern dancer, or just a dancer?
I did consider myself a ballet dancer. At Juilliard, there was a moment when Juilliard had a very vibrant kind of ballet history. And the movement to Lincoln Center, which is a long story I won't go into, kind of curtailed that. But suffice to say, before Lincoln Center, the three resident companies at Juilliard were American Ballet Theater with Anthony Tudor, Lamone, and Graham. They were all in residence. And the move to Lincoln Center curtailed that. Lincoln Kirsten was a part of that in New York City Ballet, caused animosity over a long period of time because essentially Martha Hill, who was the founder of the dance department at Juilliard, did not know that this real estate deal had been struck. So that was kind of a thing. So, I'm sorry.
So you considered yourself a ballet dancer?
I did, because at Juilliard I did a lot of ballet.
Okay.
Hector Zaraspi was there. Yes.
So, yesterday in the post-show talk, you spoke about how you came to find James Baldwin and subsequently Arthur Mitchell. Can you reiterate that sort of story? Because I want to start to talk about Arthur Mitchell and his legacy and how that shaped you.
As I said yesterday with Theresa in our talk, I was having a really challenging moment at Juilliard. I mean, if this is long form conversation, the challenging moment actually was a history of Western culture class. We were asked to write a paper, and I had not been given a grade that was passing because I had made the statement, something, an innocuous statement actually, about Egypt and Africa. And so the woman came to me and said, the teacher, and said, we don't consider Egypt to be part of Africa. And so that was the first time I'd ever heard the royal we used. And I was like, who's we in my head? And so then she said, yes, we consider it a part of the Middle East. So that's how you should refer to it. And I was like, but my eyes are not lying. I'm looking at the map. This is, So after that experience, I went home, turned on television, and I see this guy. And he's talking, and he's like really intellectually like just amazing. And I find out that his name is James Baldwin. And so not long after that, I began to just read everything of James Baldwin that I can get my hands on. And so what I've discovered recently, because there was a moment where I think the expectation I would have danced with Ailey, but after graduating from Juilliard, but I just really, when I saw Arthur Mitchell again in my Juilliard years, he reminded me so much of James Baldwin that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go this route because he's got that thing.
What was it that you saw in them that reminded you that they reminded each other? Well,
they're both from Harlem, Harlem born. That's number one. Both intellectually superior, but unlettered. Him and Lorraine Hansberry both were unlettered. They did not go to college. And so that for me spoke mountains of just.
I think that another thing for me is the audacity. Just the plain audacity.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
To be unabashedly black and to talk about white people and to white people to their faces.
Yes.
The way that they did, articulating
the buckwheat.
What they did. Like,
yes.
I always say that Arthur Mitchell, think about it, like if he became a member of New York City Ballet in 1955, right? The idea that this man required that everybody call him Mr. Mitchell as a black man.
Yeah.
That is audacity.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's something about there's a lot of respectability politics in Arthur Mitchell and embedded in Dance Theatre of Harlem because he was teaching us how to navigate spaces, but he was doing so like creating his own terms.
Yeah, and also, while it does, the respectability politics thing has popped up as an idea, but I have a friend, Imani Perry, who's a professor, now at Harvard, and in her book, May We Forever Stand, which is about the Negro National Anthem, she talks about that. And she talks about the fact that, black people are very ordered people. Like, we're very ordered. The cotillions are a part of that, and so sometimes I think our sense of order may be confused as respectability, when actually it's just who we are at some level. Well,
Más o menos.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yes, and
right,
because
yeah,
I feel like
both and
yeah,
right, mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk. We just had a conversation during intermission about Dance Theatre of Harlem and the idea that when Mr. Mitchell started the school, it started in a format that we now recognize as outreach or community engagement. And so he broke the idea that he wasn't starting a conservatory, which meant that anybody could come in wearing anything and for 50 cents could take as many classes as they wanted, which was antithetical to ballet at the time. And so I would love to hear, we started this kind of conversation about like, that's kind of crazy because it's the model that is, everything that Mr. Mitchell did in the 70s is what ballet is seeking to do to make itself relevant and diverse and open and welcoming now.
Right. That's right. That's right. Well, I should start by saying that my school and other schools, the public school system, and I don't know how this happened, but we all were put into buses, taken down to the theater. Theresa actually was performing in these performances as a child. Dance Theatre of Harlem was in Philadelphia. And we would watch lecture demonstrations. And so we watched a whole bar. We watched a whole center. I remember learning from Arthur Mitchell what a baker's dozen was. He would do turns with a female dancer and say, okay, let me see a baker's dozen. So of course I went home, I was like, what's a baker's dozen? And so it was a wonderful, and also it was also a way that he got dancers on stage to teach them how to perform. Our ballet mistress, Lorraine Graves, auditioned in Philadelphia actually for him. Yeah. So one day I was watching, I went through every day, I still have all the ticket stubs, and then one day there was this really tall, beautiful, gorgeous woman at the back of the bar, and it was eventually Lorraine Graves, who ended up becoming a ballet mistress for the company, or rehearsal person, and a dancer at the same time. She was a brilliant woman, honestly. She could remember everything,
So the 80s
yeah.
was like the heyday of Dance Theatre of Harlem.
Yes.
Lots of creativity, the rep expanding. You got the Firebird, Creole Giselle, international touring. The company was extraordinarily diverse in body, shape, height. Lorraine Graves was almost 6 feet tall, and then we had the short girls and the tall girls, and we had male dancers who were just as diverse.
Yes.
You were a part of that. Can you tell me a little bit about what that moment was like? I came in on the back end of it, but it feels like there was this electricity. I don't know. I looked at you all and was just like, I have just never seen anything so amazing, because everything was represented in one space, and yet it was classically uniform at the same time. Yeah, what was it like for you?
I think the thing that was fascinating to me were, of course, our people that were from other cities, Chicago, the great migration cities, Chicago, Detroit, even some from California, Texas, those cities. But what really got me, I think, was, I would say, we always held maybe 12 to maybe 13 European people of African descent. And they were from different places, from Germany, Holland, France, England,
South Africa. Well, that's not Europe, but
South Africa. That's so international, And so there was this really vibrant cultural idea happening within the working environment in New York. And then when we would travel, we always had sort of ambassadors in each city, So it was kind of like, oh, okay, so we'll get the French girl and she's going to tell us what we order in Paris, and then we'll get the German girl, and the Dutch, and So that was really a beautiful moment for me in terms of the working environment. And then artistically, we were doing a lot of very big things. We got very big very quickly, which is something that kind of challenged Arthur Mitchell in the moment. Virginia Johnson was on the kind of the tail end of what a dance career would be. But to honor her, Arthur Mitchell always got these huge ballets. I often say that there are maybe 5 people that put up the walls at DTH. Like I was a principal dancer, but I never had to be responsible for like a Giselle, or a Firebird. Like those people were phenomenal, but artists and also dedicated servants to what they were doing. And so you had no excuse. You had to make it work. It's like, all this is happening for you? A Creole Giselle, a Firebird. And so that was really remarkable, watching those individuals make all of that work. It was awesome.
Is there a moment or a ballet that stands out for you in particular, a moment either on tour or it could be on and off or off stage, quite frankly.
Right. You know, typically in ballet companies, and you've seen all the horrible movies about them, you know, it's all competitive and people are mean and stuff. And Dance Theatre of Harlem never was like that. Never was like that. And so there was a moment in a ballet, Fall River Legend, by Agnes DeMille. It's about the legend of Lizzie Borden, actually quite appropriate, because I think we might be near Fall River now, are we? You know, but anyway, are we near Fall River? I think we are, actually. But the legend of Lizzie Borden, you know, Lizzie Borden took me out and whatever. And Agnes DeMille, the great female choreographer, did a wonderful ballet to this, and Arthur Mitchell got it for Virginia Johnson. And there was a moment where there's a lovely duet or pas de deux with Virginia Johnson, who was Lizzie Borden, and the preacher gentleman, Lowell Smith. And people would come from the dressing rooms to watch it. It was really quite amazing because there was artistry on display that we both loved and respected. And it wasn't just that. We watched each other do a lot of stuff, you know, in that way. You know, like when Theresa had to do, as I said yesterday, 32 serenades on one tour. You know, there were 32 George Balanchine serenades on one tour.
One of the things that I like to tell this to whoever will listen, but you know how dancers say merde or toy, toy, toy. We also said have fun. Mm-hmm. People say, have fun. And then you come off stage and be like, oh, I had fun.
Exactly.
Like that was the sort of sentiment that dance theater had. And we had families inside the company. So it was a real community sort of culture. Not perfect, but a real community culture so that there was, even if there was competition organically, there was always this idea of you represent something larger than yourself.
Yes.
So you never got larger than what the mission was. So I don't know if you want to talk about that statement and how that statement has impacted you, because it definitely, I walk with it in my life. And so how does it show up for you? Yeah,
you know, in his later years, right before Arthur Mitchell went to his emeritus space, he shared a lot of stuff with me that I'm still processing, actually, both as an artist and as a black man as well, because there was much that he did not share. He kept the bad side out of his in other words, there were things that happened in his life as an artist with New York City Ballet that I found out about that he never told anyone about, because he was protective of how we would receive that information. But one of the things that he always said to us was, young man, you're representing something larger than yourself. In fact, I should tell this story. Do you mind? Is that okay?
I don't know what the story is. Go for it.
So I was in South America. Myself and Keith Thomas, my bestie at the time, were roommates, and we were going to go hang out. So we went, and we had a whole bottle of wine. It was Argentina. And so we went, we were hanging out. We were in the street. We were loud, you know, and he drives up. I didn't realize that when Arthur Mitchell got off the airplane that he had to go to work. Now I know. But he didn't get to go to the hotel, take a nap, and then go to the dance club, you know. So he gets out the car, and it was like a cartoon where you see a person small, and then they become this huge. And so by the time he got it for me, I was like, oh, my God. He was like, young man, you're representing something larger than yourself. And then he turned on his heels and went into the hotel. Needless to say, we did not go out that night. We just were petrified the entire evening. And the next day we were in class, and he let us know that he was not happy with us. But later on, when he was emeritus, he did tell me that phrase happened because during the civil rights movement, he was still dancing with New York City Ballet. And people were saying, Arthur, why are you there? You know, it's a civil rights movement. You should be out here with us and blah, 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 blah. You're wasting your time over there. You know, and it was Harold Belafonte, one of his good friends, who said to him, no, Arthur, you should stay there because you're representing something larger than yourself. And he did, you know, and he did. And I think he carried that with him. He was actually courted to go to Hollywood. There are several Hollywood movies with Arthur Mitchell. At that time, Nuclear Armageddon was a big deal. So he did a movie with Candice Bergen called, yes, a movie with Candice Bergen. I don't know if anybody remembers Candice Bergen. Candice Bergen called The Day the Fish Came Out, which was like about nuclear destruction. And so he's in that movie, and he eventually, you know, and of course he had to dance a little, whatever, you know. But afterwards he said, you know, Robert, I really, really did not like Hollywood. It's like it wasn't for me. That's when I knew that I need to stick with what I know, which is dance. And so.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. I want to switch modes, and I want to talk about your choreographic voice and style, which I think, knowing you, and now you kind of know more about Robert, talk to us about how you created this amalgam of this neoclassical style, which you love, modern dance, which is a part of your background, as well as the social dance element.
Well, there was a ballet, that Dance Theatre of Harlem, kind of. It was the meat and potatoes ballet of its day. It was called Forces of Rhythm. There were four gentlemen. It was choreographed by Louis Johnson, who was a student at the School of American Ballet, actually, along at the same time as Arthur Mitchell, right?
Dolores Brown was actually, they were in the same class together. Yeah.
Got it. But he eventually became a choreographer, and he choreographed this ballet that had four men clad in loincloths, African loincloths, four women in like the baptismal long skirts that are people would know them from Alvin Ailey's Cry. And then there were four dancers that were clad in Balanchine simple ballet dress, and the men in the Balanchine simple ballet dress as he'd worn at New York City Ballet, Arthur Mitchell worn. And Louis Johnson created this ballet that was basically showing people that there was a range within this culture, these people, that was really important. And it used popular music. There was some Tchaikovsky thrown in there from one of his symphonies. But I was smitten because I got to not only hear my Motown music, but I also got to hear the Tchaikovsky, which I come to love as well. And so in coming to the style that I worked in, I really just kind of continued in that mode, kind of making it a little more seamless. And honestly, to be perfectly honest, and my colleagues that I dance with, because I once said this to my colleagues that I dance with, and said to them, you know, the ballets that I do now, I don't think the company that I dance with could have performed to a certain extent, because it was a different generation. And so the ability to, we have such sophisticated words for it now. Code switch, you know, was one of the words. You know, the ability to code switch physically is a thing that our dancers nowadays do quite easily. One of the things that I've been thinking about in my head right now is if you understand it as a philosophy as an older person, but sometimes you're forced into code switching at a time where you might be ill prepared for it, like a kid at Pennsylvania Ballet, and not realizing that you know, that's another conversation. I'm sorry.
No, don't be sorry. I feel like it's an interesting thing that makes me think of someone like a Billy Wilson, who was classically trained studied with like Anthony Tudor, who's told him, you really could be a ballet dancer, but nobody's going to hire you, so just go to Broadway. And so he did, and he auditioned, and he got into Bells Are Ringing. And then he went on tour with Chita Rivera in West Side Story.
That's right.
And Carl Shook called him and said, hey, there's a company called the Dutch National Ballet that's starting. Why don't you come over here? And he got a soloist ballet contract, right? So I say that to say that usually it goes in
And this
reverse.
was in the
60s,
60s? Okay.
So usually it goes the opposite. Usually you do a ballet career and then you go to Broadway as you're aging out. But because Black people have always had to be consistently versatile, there was no guarantee that you were going to have a career doing just one thing. So you learned how to tap, you learned how to sing, you learned how. So this what is it? The three triple threat.
Right, triple
We were
threat.
always quadruple threats and XYZ. So I think that the organic nature of being Black in America or being Black on the planet requires you
Does
to
give
be
you
able
that.
to facile in that way that you
back
can
and
move between things. Some people are better at it than others. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that what you're talking about is, I'm going to go back to this because I don't necessarily think respectability politics is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's a necessary thing. So
Right.
I think that the dancers of the 80s who were ballet dancers were so hell-bent on being accepted in this way that rigidity of the ballet world was a part of the identification. And so you didn't want to. And this, remember, the 80s was when there was modern over here, and it was believed that modern dancers were just dancers who couldn't be ballet dancers. Right? So that's also a part of it. Like, you wouldn't want to show that you could get down because that meant that you were less than a something.
That's right.
So I think that that's more a part of it.
Right. I hear
than
you. I
Whether
hear you.
or not they really could.
Right. Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Welcome to our living room.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. But then this group, now, it's funny, there's this new thing called contemporary, but I clearly remember in the 80s when Ailey was doing that type of work, and it was considered a little déclassé, combining the ballet with the jazz and with all of the other stuff. Now it's in every competition you can see.
I'm just saying.
Well,
I mean, you just said it.
there you go.
So, Robert,
Yeah,
now you're the artistic director of Dance Theatre of Harlem.
sometimes.
So, what are you going to do? I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, this is exciting. I mean, I remember sitting on 181st Street
Yes.
talking about things.
That's right.
So here you are.
Remember the guy saved that jumped through the window, remember?
You know what?
We ran out there.
Listen.
We saved him, though.
Listen. What are you going to do? I'm excited. I am excited to see what this moment brings for you, but also what you will bring to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, just some thoughts.
I'm very modest, and so I don't want to ever say that it is me, but the dancers that I have and how they're working in this moment are incredibly unique as people. There's a tremendous amount of support for one another within their environment. It is unheard of. It is sometimes for people that grew up in more competitive, like Ty, when she first saw it, she read it as a little unfocused. And I was like, no, watch them a little longer, because they're goading each other into greatness, And so part of what I'm observing, part of my job is to, I think, for me, a little bit redefine the environment a little, because at some level, and this goes for any generation of Dance Theatre of Harlem, you have a group of young people that have experienced possibly from little to large trauma at one point in time or another, from being at a predominantly white ballet institution or otherwise, or even a university institution. And so I'm very, very sensitive to that, you know. And so that is going to inform my decisions. It's going to make the art. It's going to, you know, I believe that, you know, like Tide for the school, if I may jump around a little, you know, wants to incorporate a lot of health and wellness into the conservatory environment. Like she's hell-bent on that.
So Ty Jimenez is a former principal ballet dancer with Dance Theatre of Harlem and with Boston Ballet, and has now come to be the director of the school.
Yeah. You know, and she wants to, I don't know if you've ever seen the videos of, there's a video of all the dads of one elementary school in one city all lined up for the first graders and second graders of their first day of school. And they all lined up, and the kids had to walk through them, and they were high-fiving them the first day, and it was a beautiful moment. And Ty wants to do that with the school. Like, I feel like we want to create art, but we want to do it through the healing and transformation of and power of what we bring to the culture. You know, I think we do that.
I think it's really interesting that, for me, the thing that excites me about your appointment is, you know, that you are deeply rooted in the original strands of DNA of Dance Theatre of Harlem. And I think that we are in a moment in the world.
That's right.
Where that is necessary.
Yeah.
For the world, but also for ballet. Because what you're talking about is some of the work that I've been trying to do in terms of like studio culture, shifting studio culture so that's healthier and safer and more
yes.
that there's a non-hierarchical form of communication. And some of that is what you're talking about. Is taking away the things that have made ballet, dare I say, toxic. And I think that that's a really beautiful. And I think it's interesting that you're saying that is what is going to lead the art, which is usually reversed. What does that mean for you? Like, how does that present? How does that culture lead the art or the works that you choose for these humans?
You know, first of all, creating safe space. You know, we saw a work tonight or this afternoon, William Forsythe's Blake Works. He was a wonderful person for the dancers to work with. They trust him, you know, and so therefore, getting another work by him is imperative for me because the trust has already been built and the art will grow from the trust. You know what I mean? I do. And so, you know, like some people, I got pushback and we're like, oh, another Forsythe? I'm like, yeah, another one, because this is not just about, it's about we're making human beings. You know, we're making human beings, and that's important, you know, and so thank you. And so, yeah, you know, that's my approach. You know, and because you're right, there's been a lot of toxic stuff that's been in the news about the ballet environment. A lot of this has to be rethought, you know.
What do you look for in a dancer?
That's a really good, of course, good technique, you know, from just like something that is working well. But I also look for an ability to, like, there's some steps I get from return in my audition. Something very simple, like a little walk for the guys, where they do the little walk this way, you know, which is incredibly hard for certain people.
Just saying.
You know? And then for the women, you know, there's something that Arthur Mitchell, well, I don't know if we coined it or he coined it, but he called it the DTH tip.
Are you bringing it back?
Well, the DTH tip is in return. Yes.
No, but I'm saying, are you bringing it back?
Yes.
Hallelujah. Amen. Okay, we can go.
So, well, the DTH tip, it's centered around black women because Arthur Mitchell was raised by a black woman, and he just felt that the typical environment that ballet happened in, he called it at times false modesty. The false modesty that was emanated within the ballet environment was ill-fitting for black women, and so he often wanted them to actually go beyond and be bigger than what the typical...
So I'm going to describe the tip.
Yes.
Okay. Imagine that you have a pencil skirt on and heels. That's what it is. So you're walking and there's a little switch in your hip, and it's a little sassy and it's a little sexy, but it is lifted and elegant. And so there is a little switch in the hip.
Yes.
And it just carries, as the kids would say.
Yeah.
And it was it was signature to Dance Theatre of Harlem. So even if Dance Theatre of Harlem was doing Balanchine, if it was Four T's, you would see the tip there.
Yes.
And so it's for me, I was like, oh, I mourn the tip. Because it was such it did something. It was almost like it was a calling card.
It was a calling card. That's right. That's right.
And it was, and Dance Theatre of Harlem is the only company in the world that did that walk, that had that aesthetic.
Yeah, had that aesthetic. Yeah, there's a moment in my ballet, Nyman String Quartet, where the women walk on with that tip, and every time they come out, people go like, "Oh."
That's right.
Yeah, it's very interesting and beautiful, honestly. It happens on the demi-point, actually, and it literally is just walking on the demi-point, but it's got a thing.
Take a typical ballerina walk on demi-point, walking, presenting, but it has a little switch in the hip, and there's a little something in the face that says, "I know you're looking."
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Again, the false modesty sort of thing. When the male presenting dancers lead the point dancer, there is this presentational sort of thing, and it is in our context. If you think about the royal court, right, and being led this way, it is our version of that, going back to the cotillion, going back to that sort of thing.
That's right.
So it's embedded in it is this like organic blackness, a part of our culture that's not over the top. You don't even know what you're watching, but you know what you're watching.
She does have that Curry. Well, she does have that. Yes, she's a big Scandal fan here.
Olivia Pope.
Yes,
a little bit.
Yes, that's
the
right.
Street version. Of the ballet version.
Of the ballet version. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yeah. So your dancers, it feels like Robert enjoys people, and he enjoys talking to people and getting to know people, which, there are different minds of whether or not artistic directors should engage on certain levels. But you really do enjoy getting to know your artists and them also knowing you. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that is going to be, actually we were sitting outside after the talk back, and Delaney was saying that she really appreciated you as a director because you were easy to talk to, and you were a really good leader because she felt seen and heard and stuff like that. So just so you know.
Delaney.
But what part of that, like, talk to me a little bit about that in terms of leadership, your style of leadership.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I want to tell the funny Delaney story because it is a generational one. one day when I first started the job, I walked to the studio and I'd been frustrated with some of the administrative stuff that was happening in the building. So I got into the studio and I was like, ugh. And so the lady's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, well, it's just too many chiefs and not enough Indians. And so her eyes got really big. She was like, Mr. Garland, that's not appropriate. And I was like, okay, well, we'll figure something else out, you know. But it was a wonderful moment, you know, where, you know, I do give them that kind of, we have that relationship. I just love giving them history. You know, it actually comes from running a school, honestly. You know, when you have a school with parents, you know, Arthur Mitchell put me in charge of the Dance Theatre of Harlem school the same time he made me resident choreographer. The resident choreographer part is like the great, cool, work with professional dancers, I'm so important side. But the school side taught me everything. It taught me everything. Because, see, people are plunking down their money for their child that you're supposed to take care of for 9 months, you know? And that responsibility taught me everything. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to fix things when things were going wrong, you know, and again with the student body as well, from age 3 to age 20, whatever, you know.
The thing I love about Robert is Robert would know everybody's name, everybody's parent, their auntie, their birthday, like their dog, like seriously, like organically, and it's like, hey, it's like you are community, and I think that is really what's special about you. I don't want to cry.
Oh no. Lord. Lord, yes.
But it is the thing that is the lifeblood of an organization like DTH.
It is.
It's the part that you don't see, but is really, really important. And you are the embodiment of that just organically, authentically. And so when you talk about leading a whole organization and thinking about or organism, if you were at my talk, that's what I'm excited to see grow and build.
Yeah, you know, Arthur Mitchell was from a different generation, and talk about stuff that he'd been through. You know, it was kind of quite amazing. But suffice it to say that, you know, I got a chance to observe both the good and some of the bad that he, you know, and some of that bad was created by, it was circumstantial. Being a black man that was growing up post, you know, a Harlem Renaissance, pre-civil rights, you know, Brown versus Board of Education was not a thing yet. You know, Arthur Mitchell, in his environment at New York City Ballet, if something happened to him, he had no legal protections, actually. He had none. It would just happen, you know, and it did happen, actually. And so, yeah. I'm sorry.
I hope that you guys have gotten a little window into not only, like, you know, artistic director is a huge title, but the what I learned in my work with artistic directors is there are reasons why companies look the way they do. Because somebody's value system is, you're watching somebody's value system. You're watching what they appreciate and what they think is important. And you don't know it. You just look at it and you go like, oh, those dancers look like that. Or they're dancing that. Or they're not dancing this. And those are all choices that a person is making. And sometimes we don't know the people. We just know the title. And so I think it's really important to know the humans behind these titles so that we understand the choices, the whys of the whats. And so this is what I wanted to, like, I'm glad this is the conversation I wanted to have because I think you better understand Robert Garland and you'll better understand his Dance Theatre of Harlem the next time that you see it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.